Ever wonder why the alien queen was built from garbage bags, or how a tea trolley nearly destroyed one of sci-fi's greatest sequels? From drug busts that changed casting to knife tricks gone wrong, James Cameron's action masterpiece harbored secrets as bizarre as the aliens themselves. Behind the scenes lurked crew mutinies, shotgun mishaps, and a child star who vanished forever after one perfect performance. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Aliens 1986. Fact 1. Cameron pitched with dollar signs. When James Cameron walked into that pivotal meeting with executives at 20th Century Fox, he had one clear goal in mind: convince them that his sequel to Alien would be a massive success. The young director, fresh off his breakthrough hit The Terminator in 1984, knew he needed to make a bold impression on the studio suits, who were still uncertain about greenlighting another Alien movie. Cameron's approach was as direct as it was memorable. He took out a piece of paper and wrote down his proposed title for the sequel. But instead of simply writing Aliens with a regular letter S at the end, Cameron made a calculated move that would become legendary in Hollywood pitch meeting folklore. He deliberately changed that final S into a dollar sign, creating Alien right there in front of the Fox executives. This wasn't just a clever visual gag or a moment of showing off. Cameron was making a clear statement about his confidence in the project's commercial potential. By transforming the plural form of alien into a symbol of financial success, he was essentially promising the studio that his vision would translate directly into box office profits. The dollar sign served as both a title and a prediction rolled into one simple gesture. The boldness of this move perfectly captured Cameron's personality and his approach to filmmaking at the time. He wasn't just asking for permission to make a sequel, he was guaranteeing that it would be profitable. This kind of cocky confidence might have seemed presumptuous from a less proven director, but Cameron had already demonstrated his ability to deliver both critically acclaimed and commercially successful films. Years later, Cameron confirmed this legendary story during interviews, explaining that he felt the movie needed to have a pluralized title because there would be an entire army of aliens instead of just the single creature from the original film. The dollar sign addition was his way of communicating to Fox that the movie would be a financial winner, not just an artistic endeavor. Fact 2. Tea time nearly killed production. One of the most bizarre conflicts in movie history almost derailed the production of Aliens, and it all centered around something as innocent as afternoon tea. When James Cameron arrived at Pinewood Studios in England to film his sequel, he encountered a deeply entrenched British film crew tradition that would become his biggest nightmare: mandatory tea breaks that happened twice a day, regardless of what was being filmed. The cultural clash was immediate and intense. Cameron, known for his demanding work ethic and military-style approach to filmmaking, expected his crew to work through scenes without interruption when they were in the middle of complex action sequences or delicate special effects work. However, the British crew had been following the same tea break schedule for decades, and they saw no reason to change their routine for this young Canadian director, who they dismissively nicknamed Grizzly Adams because of his beard. The situation reached a breaking point when Cameron's assistant director, Derek Cracknell, a veteran of the British film industry, openly supported the crew's right to their tea breaks and refused to help Cameron maintain his preferred shooting schedule. Cameron viewed this as insubordination and a threat to his authority on set, leading him to make the dramatic decision to fire Cracknell in front of the entire crew. What happened next was unprecedented in the normally polite world of British filmmaking. The crew staged what can only be described as a full-scale mutiny, walking off the set in protest of Cracknell's dismissal. According to reports from the production, Cameron became so frustrated with the tea cart situation that he was allegedly ready to physically confront the elderly woman who pushed the tea trolley around the studio, even though she was simply doing her job. The rebellion became so serious that Cameron seriously considered either moving the entire production to a different location or replacing the entire British crew with workers who would be more willing to follow his directions. The tea cart itself reportedly suffered damage during the conflicts, though the exact details of what happened to it remain unclear. Fact 3. Carrie Henn never acted again. In one of Hollywood's most unusual career decisions, Carrie Henn walked away from acting forever at the age of 10, right after starring in one of the biggest science fiction movies of all time. The young girl who played Newt, the brave survivor child in Aliens, had been discovered by casting agents who visited her elementary school in England, where she was living because her father was stationed at a Royal Air Force base as a member of the United States Air Force. What makes Henn's story even more remarkable is that she had absolutely no acting experience before being cast in Aliens. She had never been in a school play, never appeared in commercials, and had never shown any interest in performing. James Cameron chose her purely based on what he called her great face and expressive eyes, and a quiet, soulful quality that he felt was perfect for the character of Newt. Despite winning a Saturn Award for Best Performance by a Younger Actor in 1987 and receiving widespread praise for her natural acting ability, Hen made a conscious decision to return to a normal childhood when her family moved back to the United States. She later explained that she wanted to experience regular American school life and make genuine friendships, rather than wondering if people liked her for herself or because she had been in a famous movie. The decision came with unexpected consequences that revealed the darker side of celebrity, even for a child actor. Hen's mother, Rosaline, revealed in interviews that the family received disturbing phone calls and messages from jealous people who said that Carrie should never have gotten the part. These cruel comments showed how some people reacted with spite toward a child's success, forcing the young girl to deal with adult malice that she was too young to understand. Instead of pursuing Hollywood fame, Hen followed a completely different path. She attended California State University at Stanislaus, where she earned degrees in child development and liberal studies, and eventually became an elementary school teacher in California. She married a fellow classmate who became a police officer, and they started a family together. Today, she occasionally appears at science fiction conventions where she meets fans of the movie, but she has never regretted her decision to leave acting behind. Fact 4. James Remar was fired for drugs. The role of Corporal Hicks, which eventually became one of Michael Biehn's most memorable performances, was originally supposed to belong to a completely different actor whose time on the Aliens set ended in scandal and chaos. James Remar had been cast as the tough, reliable Marine who becomes Ripley's romantic interest and trusted ally throughout the film, and he had already begun filming scenes when everything went terribly wrong. For years after leaving the production, Remar claimed that he had to depart due to urgent family matters back in the United States, or because of creative differences with director James Cameron. However, decades later, the truth finally came out when Remar admitted in interviews that he had been fired after being arrested for drug possession while the movie was being filmed in England. The drug arrest was serious enough on its own, but Remar's troubles on set went far beyond his legal problems. According to his co-star Al Matthews, who played Sergeant Apone, Remar was involved in an incredibly dangerous incident that could have injured or killed someone. While handling what should have been a prop shotgun during filming, Remar was apparently carrying a weapon loaded with live ammunition instead of the blank rounds that are typically used in movie productions. The loaded shotgun accidentally discharged while Remar was on the Aliens set, sending a real shotgun blast through the wall of the soundstage. What made this incident even more bizarre was that the neighboring soundstage was being used to film Little Shop of Horrors, the musical directed by Frank Oz. The blast created a hole in the wall between the two productions, potentially endangering the cast and crew of both movies. This combination of drug-related legal troubles and the serious safety violation with live ammunition made it impossible for Cameron and the producers to keep Remar on the project. Michael Biehn, who had just worked with Cameron on The Terminator, was quickly flown in from Paris to replace Remar and reshoot all of his scenes. Interestingly, some shots of Remar from behind still appear in the finished film, since there wasn't time to reshoot every single scene he had already completed. Fact 5. The Alien Queen started as garbage. One of the most iconic movie monsters in science fiction history began its life as little more than trash bags and sports equipment held together with hope and imagination. When James Cameron approached special effects master Stan Winston with his ambitious idea for creating a 14-foot-tall alien queen that could be operated by human performers, Winston's first reaction was to think that Cameron had completely lost his mind, since nothing like that had ever been attempted before in movie history. To test whether Cameron's seemingly impossible vision could actually work in real life, Winston and his team at Stan Winston Studios decided to build what became known as the Garbage Bag Queen. This crude but essential prototype was constructed using the most basic materials they could find: black garbage bags to create the outer shell, pieces of foam core board to provide structure, and ski poles that served as extensions for the creature's arms and claws. The makeshift alien queen was then suspended from a crane behind the studio, with two stunt performers positioned inside the contraption to control its movements. Despite looking absolutely nothing like the terrifying final creature that would eventually appear in the movie, this humble garbage bag test proved that Cameron's concept could actually function as a practical effect. The prototype demonstrated that human performers could successfully operate such a large creature and make it move in believable, threatening ways. Winston later explained that this proof of concept test became legendary within his studio, and the term garbage bag test became their standard phrase for any early prototype work designed to prove whether an ambitious idea could be turned into reality. The success of this basic test gave the team confidence to move forward with building the actual 14-foot-tall queen that required 2 puppeteers inside the suit operating its arms, while 16 additional crew members were needed to control all of its various appendages using a complex system of hydraulics, cables, and control rods. The final alien queen became one of the most impressive practical effects ever created, but it all started with that simple collection of trash bags and ski poles that proved Cameron's wild idea wasn't completely crazy after all. Fact 6. Newt was often a dummy. Many viewers of Aliens have no idea that the little girl they're watching on screen is actually a carefully crafted fake in some of the movie's most intense scenes. The production team discovered early in filming that even though Carrie Henn was only 10 years old and relatively small for her age, she was still too heavy for Sigourney Weaver to carry around during the demanding action sequences, especially when Weaver also had to handle multiple heavy weapons and other equipment at the same time. The solution was both practical and slightly creepy. The special effects department created a lightweight dummy that was an exact replica of Carrie Henn's body and face. To make this dummy as realistic as possible, Henn had to undergo a full body casting process, which involved having molds made of her entire torso and face. The young actress later described this experience as being really cool, especially when she got to see how much the finished dummy actually looked like her. The dummy was primarily used during scenes where Ripley carries Newt through dangerous situations, particularly in the alien hive sequences where Weaver needed to move quickly while carrying a flamethrower, pulse rifle, and other heavy gear. However, the dummy wasn't quite perfect enough to fool sharp-eyed viewers who knew what to look for. In several shots, particularly when Ripley is carrying Newt through the hive complex, you can clearly see that the child's hands look unnaturally stiff and plastic-like. These visible dummy hands have become a well-known continuity error among dedicated Aliens fans, who often point them out during viewings of the film. The mistake is most noticeable in close-up shots where the camera lingers on Newt's supposedly unconscious form as Ripley navigates through the dangerous alien environment. Despite the obvious artificial appearance of the hands in these moments, the dummy served its essential purpose of allowing Weaver to perform the physically demanding scenes without exhausting herself or endangering a real child during the complex and potentially dangerous action sequences. Fact 7. The knife trick drew real blood. One of the most memorable scenes in Aliens features Bishop the android demonstrating his superhuman reflexes by rapidly stabbing a knife between Hudson's spread fingers, but what audiences don't realize is that real blood was actually shed during the filming of this tense moment. The knife trick scene wasn't even part of James Cameron's original script, but was instead an idea that came to the director while they were on set, leading to one of the movie's most iconic moments being completely improvised. Cameron decided to keep the scene spontaneous by deliberately not telling Bill Paxton, who played the nervous Marine Hudson, exactly what was going to happen during the filming. While Lance Henriksen, who played Bishop, knew the plan and had practiced the knife movements, Paxton was left in the dark so that his reaction of genuine surprise and fear would be completely authentic on camera. The timing of this scene's filming made the situation even more dangerous than it should have been. According to Henriksen, the knife trick was shot on the morning after the cast had thrown a goodbye party as they were preparing to fly back to Los Angeles. This meant that Henriksen was likely dealing with the effects of the previous night's festivities when he had to perform the delicate and precise movements required for the scene. The first take of the knife trick went perfectly, with Henriksen successfully completing the rapid stabbing motion between Paxton's fingers without any problems. However, when they decided to film a second take to get additional coverage, disaster struck. During the second attempt, Paxton moved his pinky finger slightly into the path of the knife just as Henriksen was bringing it down, resulting in the blade actually cutting Paxton's finger and drawing real blood. Henriksen later described the incident with a mixture of guilt and amusement, explaining that he gave Paxton what he called a blood blister by pinching the finger with the knife blade. While Henriksen said he felt bad about hurting his co-star, he also noted that Paxton was acting like he had been stabbed with an ice pick when the actual injury was relatively minor. Fact 8. Cameron gave death bouquets. Sigourney Weaver created one of the most thoughtful and darkly humorous traditions in movie history during the filming of Aliens, by giving each cast member a bouquet of flowers on the day their character met their gruesome end. This touching gesture emerged from Weaver's recognition that she was playing the most experienced performer on a set filled with many younger actors who were facing their first major film roles, and she wanted to acknowledge the emotional weight of filming their characters' death scenes. As the star of both Alien and Aliens, Weaver had already established herself as a seasoned professional who understood the intense psychological demands of making a horror action movie. She recognized that many of her fellow cast members were relatively new to the film industry and might find it emotionally challenging to film their characters' violent deaths at the hands of the terrifying alien creatures. The bouquet tradition served multiple purposes beyond just being a kind gesture. It helped create a sense of camaraderie and support among the cast members, showing that even though their characters were meeting horrible fates on screen, the actors themselves were valued and appreciated by their colleagues. The flowers also provided a way to mark the significance of each actor's final day of filming, turning what could have been a somber or stressful experience into something more ceremonial and meaningful. Weaver would present each bouquet with a lighthearted comment along the lines of, "Oh, that's your day today," which helped maintain the balance between acknowledging the seriousness of the work while keeping the mood on set from becoming too heavy or depressing. This approach was particularly important given the intense and often frightening nature of the scenes they were filming, where characters were being killed by acid-bleeding aliens in various horrific ways. The gesture became so appreciated by the cast that it turned into an expected part of the filming process, with actors looking forward to receiving their bouquet as a kind of graduation ceremony, marking their completion of work on the movie. This tradition demonstrated Weaver's leadership role not just as the film's star, but as someone who genuinely cared about the well-being and morale of everyone involved in the production. Fact 9. The score was written overnight. The dramatic musical score that accompanies the final battle between Ripley and the Alien Queen was composed under some of the most stressful conditions in film music history, with composer James Horner literally writing the climactic music overnight before it had to be recorded. When Horner arrived in London expecting to have his usual 6 weeks to compose the entire score for Aliens, he discovered that James Cameron was still editing the film, and there was absolutely nothing ready for him to work with. The situation quickly became a nightmare for Horner, who found himself with only 3 weeks instead of the promised 6 to create music for an entire major motion picture. This compressed timeline was made even worse by Cameron's constant changes to the film's edit, which meant that Horner would receive new versions of scenes and have to completely rewrite music that he had already composed to match the updated footage. The most extreme example of this rushed process occurred with the film's climactic sequence, where Ripley faces off against the Alien Queen in the power loader suit. Horner received the final cut of this crucial scene so late in the process that he had to compose the entire musical accompaniment in a single overnight session, working through the night to have something ready for the orchestra to record the next day. This chaotic schedule created serious tension between Horner and Cameron, with the composer becoming increasingly frustrated by the director's inability to provide him with stable, final versions of scenes to score. The stress of constantly having to revise and rewrite his work, combined with the impossibly tight deadlines, pushed Horner to his breaking point. After completing work on Aliens, Horner publicly stated that he would never work with James Cameron again, calling the experience a complete nightmare. However, despite this dramatic declaration, the two men eventually reconciled their professional relationship. Years later, Horner ended up composing the scores for two of Cameron's biggest blockbusters, Titanic in 1997 and Avatar in 2009, proving that even the most heated Hollywood feuds can sometimes be resolved when the right projects come along. Fact 10. Marines were historically inaccurate. James Cameron made a public apology to the United States Marine Corps years after Aliens was released, admitting that he had completely misrepresented how real Marines actually behave, and acknowledging that his fictional colonial Marines were based on a fundamentally flawed understanding of military discipline and culture. The director confessed that when he was writing and filming Aliens, he knew absolutely nothing about the actual Marine Corps and had created his futuristic soldiers based on stereotypes and misconceptions rather than real military knowledge. The colonial Marines in the movie display behavior that would be completely unacceptable in any real military unit, particularly the Marine Corps, which is known for its extremely high standards of discipline and professionalism. Throughout the film, the Marines openly show contempt for their commanding officer, Lieutenant Gorman, casually disregard direct orders during combat situations, and generally act like undisciplined soldiers rather than the elite fighting force that Marines are trained to be. Cameron later revealed that his portrayal of the colonial Marines was actually based on his impressions of Vietnam-era regular Army soldiers rather than Marines, drawing from popular culture depictions of disorganized and demoralized troops from that conflict. This approach resulted in characters who behaved more like a ragtag group of rebels than the highly trained and disciplined warriors that real Marines are known to be. The director's misunderstanding of military culture is most obvious in scenes where the Marines ignore orders about using weapons in the atmosphere processor, with characters like Vasquez continuing to fire her weapon despite explicit instructions to use only flamethrower. Real Marines would never display such blatant disregard for orders, especially in a life-threatening situation where following commands could mean the difference between survival and death. In his apology, Cameron acknowledged that he had learned much more about the Marine Corps since making the film and expressed regret for perpetuating inaccurate stereotypes about one of America's most respected military branches. He admitted that real Marines are far more disciplined and professional than the characters he created, and he wanted to set the record straight for any Marines who might have been offended by his portrayal of their service. Fact 11. The APC had brake failures. The heavily armored vehicle that carries the colonial Marines into battle became almost as dangerous to the film crew as the fictional aliens were to the characters, suffering from multiple mechanical failures and driver errors that nearly caused serious injuries during filming. The armored personnel carrier, which was a crucial piece of equipment for many of the movie's action sequences, proved to be far more unpredictable and hazardous than anyone on the production team had anticipated when they decided to use a real military vehicle for the scenes. The most serious incident occurred when the APC's brakes completely failed during filming, causing the massive vehicle to careen out of control and crash directly into one of the expensive cameras that was being used to capture the scene. Fortunately, producer Gail Ann Hurd had made the smart decision to operate this particular camera remotely, rather than having a camera operator standing behind it, which almost certainly prevented what could have been a fatal accident. In a separate incident that was equally dangerous, the driver of the APC made a critical error that nearly resulted in serious injuries to key members of the production team. The driver apparently forgot that the vehicle was in reverse gear instead of drive, and when he attempted to move forward, the APC suddenly shot backward instead of going in the intended direction. This unexpected movement caught everyone off guard and nearly struck both James Cameron and the cinematographer, who were positioned behind the vehicle and had no time to get out of the way. These accidents highlighted the inherent dangers of using real military equipment in movie productions, especially when working with vehicles that weigh several tons and can cause devastating damage if something goes wrong. The APC incidents became part of the growing list of safety concerns and production problems that plagued the filming of Aliens, adding to the already tense atmosphere on set caused by the crew conflicts and other technical difficulties. Despite these frightening mechanical failures, the production team continued to use the APC for the remaining scenes that required it, though they likely implemented additional safety measures to prevent similar accidents from happening again during the rest of the filming process. Fact 12. Weaver's iconic line was one take. One of the most memorable and quotable lines in science fiction movie history was delivered under intense pressure, with Sigourney Weaver having only a single opportunity to get it right due to the demanding production schedule that left no room for multiple attempts. The line, "Get away from her, you bitch," which Ripley screams at the alien queen during their final confrontation, has become one of the most famous moments in the entire Alien franchise, but Weaver was convinced she had completely ruined it when the cameras stopped rolling. The production of Aliens was running behind schedule and over budget by the time they reached the climactic scenes between Ripley and the Queen, which meant that James Cameron and his crew were under enormous pressure to complete each shot as quickly and efficiently as possible. This time crunch was particularly challenging for the complex scenes involving the massive alien queen puppet, which required dozens of technicians and puppeteers working in perfect coordination to bring the 14-foot-tall creature to life. When it came time to film the moment where Ripley delivers her defiant challenge to the Queen while operating the power loader suit, the production team knew they would have only one chance to capture the scene, with all the technical elements working properly. The coordination required between Weaver's performance, the operation of the power loader mechanical suit, and the complex puppetry of the Queen meant that resetting for a second take would have been extremely time-consuming and expensive. Despite the pressure of knowing she had only one shot to deliver the line effectively, Weaver performed the scene, and delivered what would become one of cinema's most iconic one-liners. However, immediately after Cameron called cut, Weaver was filled with doubt about her performance and was convinced that she had somehow messed up the delivery of this crucial moment in the film. Her concerns proved to be completely unfounded, as the single take captured exactly the right combination of maternal fury, determination, and raw emotion that the scene required. The line became so popular that it has been quoted and referenced countless times in other movies, television shows, and popular culture references over the decades since Aliens was released. Fact 13. Hen couldn't act scared of aliens. One of the biggest acting challenges for 10-year-old Carrie Hen during the filming of Aliens had nothing to do with memorizing lines or hitting her marks, but rather with the simple task of looking genuinely terrified of the alien creatures that were supposed to be hunting her character throughout the movie. The problem was that Hen had become genuinely fond of the actors who were wearing the alien costumes, making it nearly impossible for her to pretend that these same people were frightening monsters trying to kill her. During the long months of filming, Hen had plenty of opportunities to get to know the stunt performers and actors who spent their days inside the hot, uncomfortable alien suits that brought the xenomorphs to life on screen. These performers were naturally kind and patient with the young actress, helping her feel comfortable on what could have been an intimidating and scary movie set filled with dark corridors, loud special effects, and violent action scenes. The friendly relationships that developed between Hen and the alien performers created an unexpected problem for James Cameron and the other filmmakers. When it came time to shoot scenes where Newt was supposed to be running in terror from the deadly creatures, Hen simply couldn't muster the appropriate level of fear because she knew that underneath those frightening costumes were people she liked and trusted. To solve this acting challenge, Cameron and Hen came up with a creative solution that allowed her to tap into a more genuine source of fear. Instead of trying to imagine that the friendly performers in alien suits were actually dangerous monsters, Hen was instructed to pretend that a dog was chasing her during the scenes where she needed to look scared and run away from the aliens. This substitution worked perfectly because it gave Hen something concrete and believable to react to, rather than asking her to pretend that people she cared about were trying to hurt her. The technique allowed her to deliver convincing performances of terror and panic that helped sell the reality of her character's desperate situation, even though she was actually thinking about something completely different from what appeared to be happening on screen. Fact 14. Bishop's hole was digitally fixed. For over 20 years, movie fans who watched Aliens carefully could spot an embarrassing technical mistake during one of the film's most dramatic moments. But James Cameron finally corrected this visible error when he prepared the movie for high-definition Blu-ray release. The mistake occurred during the climactic airlock scene where Bishop, who has been torn in half by the alien queen, uses his remaining strength to grab Newt and prevent her from being sucked out into space. The scene was filmed using a clever practical effect that required Lance Henriksen, who played Bishop the android, to position his body partway through a hole that had been cut into the floor of the set. This allowed the filmmakers to create the illusion that Bishop had been ripped in half, with only his upper torso visible above the floor, while his legs were hidden below. The effect worked well for most of the scene, creating a convincing visual of the damaged android struggling to save the little girl. However, the camera angle and lighting in one particular shot revealed more than the filmmakers intended, making it possible for sharp-eyed viewers to clearly see the rectangular hole in the floor where Henriksen's body disappeared. This visible mistake broke the illusion of the special effect and reminded audiences that they were watching a movie set rather than a real spaceship airlock. The error became well known among dedicated fans of the film, who would often point it out during viewings and discuss it in online forums devoted to movie mistakes and continuity errors. For many years, this visible hole remained as evidence of the practical limitations that filmmakers faced when creating complex special effects using only physical techniques and camera tricks. When Cameron was preparing the film for its Blu-ray release as part of the Alien Anthology collection, he took advantage of modern digital technology to finally fix this long-standing problem. Using digital effects that weren't available when the movie was originally made in 1986, Cameron was able to digitally paint out the visible hole and create a seamless floor that maintained the illusion of Bishop's damaged state without revealing the behind-the-scenes trickery that made the effect possible. Fact 15. Ripley's mission time kept jumping. One of the most noticeable continuity errors in Aliens occurs during the tense sequence where the Colonial Marines first enter the Atmosphere Processing Station's reactor room and it involves the digital mission time displays that appear on the screens monitoring each Marine's helmet-mounted camera feed. These mission time counters were supposed to show the elapsed time since the Marines began their operation, providing a sense of real-time progression as the team moved deeper into the alien-infested facility. The mission time displays were designed to add authenticity to the futuristic military technology featured in the film, showing precise timestamps that would help command personnel track the progress of each individual Marine during the dangerous reconnaissance mission. James Cameron wanted these details to contribute to the realistic military atmosphere he was creating, making the audience feel like they were watching actual combat footage transmitted from a real battlefield. However, when viewers pay close attention to these mission time readouts during the reactor room sequence, they can clearly see that the numbers jump backward and forward inconsistently with each camera cut and scene change. Instead of showing a steady progression of time moving forward, as it should during a continuous military operation, the timestamps appear to reset, skip ahead, or even move backward depending on which camera angle the scene is showing. This error likely occurred because the scenes were filmed out of sequence over multiple days or weeks, which is standard practice in movie production but can create problems with props or visual elements that are supposed to show continuous time progression. The production team apparently didn't maintain careful continuity records for what the mission time displays should show in each individual shot, leading to the inconsistent timestamps that eagle-eyed fans have noticed over the years. The mistake becomes particularly obvious during the most intense moments of the reactor room sequence, when the audience's attention might normally be focused on the action and dialogue rather than the technical details displayed on the monitoring screens. Despite this continuity error, the scene remains one of the most effective and suspenseful sequences in the film, demonstrating how small technical mistakes rarely detract from strong storytelling and compelling performances.